Welcome to Mangacaps. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manga starts off with showing us a night sky, with someone talking about the senses of an assassin. We see a man being told good work, and his name is Lan. He looks up and says thank you to a man named Sir Dareth. Lan says that his senses are telling him he will be killed by Dareth Robert tonight. Dareth tells him he's performed his tasks well, and it's thanks to his effort that the family has been growing quickly. Lan says he's just doing what he should be. Dareth asks him if he believes he needs freedom. Lan tells him that shadows are meant to follow orders, and he doesn't have his own thoughts or feelings. Dareth says if he knew all of this, why did he act on his own again, then asks how he undid his brainwashing. Lan begins to sweat nervously, wondering how he noticed. We learn that the brainwashing is a method in which the Robert family control their assassins, or also called shadows. They kidnap or buy children, then make them work as assassins doing all kinds of evil deeds, essentially turning them into loyal dogs. Lan was also brainwashed, but coincidentally was able to free himself. He asks Dareth how he knew, to which he replies all of the assassins have two collars. One is brainwashing, then he snaps his fingers, saying this was the second one. Lan begins to cough up blood as his chest tightens. He screams out in pain and falls to the floor. He clenches his chest, saying it feels as if his heart is being sawed in half. Dareth smiles, telling him it's called rageworm, and it's an insect inside his body that is eating his heart. Lan asks if brainwashing wasn't enough, saying he acted so righteous, but it's sickening. Dareth says it's called being thorough, and that there's a saying in which everyone wears a mask, and his mask just happens to be thicker than others. Lan angrily says his name, and explains how he doesn't remember much of his past, since he's just been raised as a loyal hunting dog, and as the head of the assassins he lived without his own mind or emotions, but he learned of a technique called Ring of Fire, ROF for short. It was a skill that belonged to the continent's greatest swordsman a long time ago, and it allowed him to escape the brainwashing. Lan says he thought he could finally achieve freedom, and he began to have hopes. So why is he meeting death instead of freedom? He wonders what types of sins he committed to have such a meaningless death. He grits his teeth and yelling, damn it can't end this way. He stands up saying if he'll die here, then he'll at least take his arm. Or injure him at least. He screams that he won't die so pathetically, then leaps forward to Dareth. We see a slash in Lan's eyes, then his head goes flying away from his body. It plops onto the floor, and Dareth stares at his lifeless body, thinking that he prevented everything. He says it's been a while, wondering when the last time he had an injury was. He says that at least Lan will forever hold that L. He tells his men to get rid of the body, and he walks away. Lan says that Dareth is the strongest martial artist on the continent, so it's a given he can't win against him, and there's nothing he can do about it. He quickly says there is, and that he's upset he had to live life like this, and that he's upset he was humiliated and manipulated all his life. He's upset he didn't complete the ROF. He doesn't care if it's God or the devil. Someone please answer. He needs his revenge no matter what. We see his necklace begins to glow blue. A window appears saying he's been chosen by rage, and it will possess his body, but then he gets an error since he died, and his eyes close. He opens them to see a butterfly in a field, and we see a woman saying Sonny look here, as she holds a toy. He says mama, and she asks him what it is, then he stretches his hands outward. She starts to say he's so cute, and he says he cannot get used to it, and the woman cuddling him is named Sylvia. And while it's hard to believe, she picks him up and tells him to say mom. He was reincarnated as this woman's child. With all of his memories of being an assassin, he thought he was just dreaming at first. We see his mother holding him, saying the weather is nice today, and she hopes the patriarch will be back soon. Then he can give her a handsome name. He says it makes sense that she can't call him Sonny forever. Lan starts to explain that he hasn't figured out much after reincarnating, but he understands he is in a wealthy house or renowned family. And he guesses it's better to be reborn into a powerful family than a normal one, but he still needs to get his revenge. The rage and desire for revenge are still always on his mind, but he must remain patient. Since he hasn't left the room, he doesn't know where he is, or his family's position is more important, let alone the situation he's in. He was also unable to complete the ROF, so he needs to stay patient. While he was the best assassin history in the Robert family, he needs to be better than he was previously. He says based on the family's mansion, it's much more than just a renowned family. The door slams open, and a maid tells Sylvia that the patriarch is coming. Sylvia is surprised, and says she needs to prepare, but the maid tells her it's too late. She begins to grow nervous, and then the door opens, and a pressuring aura enters the room. Lan wonders what this tension is. Then we see the man enter the room. We see he has blonde hair and a red cape, but Lan recognizes him. Sylvia calls out to him. He asks if this is the child. Lan says that his ice-cold or flame-like eyes he has to be the zenith of the continent. The king of annihilation, Glenn Zeekhart. He says that it seems like he's been reborn into the most powerful family on the continent. Sylvia asks her dad if he wants to hold him, then by some sort of ironic fate, he gives him the name of Lan, since it means shadow. So it's the second life and now he has the same name again. It cuts to night, and Lan wonders if everyone is asleep now. After suffocation he's felt, he's finally gotten a chance. He says he was always sleeping, and when he wakes up Sylvia was with him, so he hasn't been able to use mana or anything, but now he gets to sleep alone. He sits up and sighs, then begins to cultivate his ROF. He explains how the continent's normal training method uses breathing, and you absorb nature's mana and gather aura in your energy core. However, ROF is like when a mage creates a mana circle around their heart, allowing him to grow in all stats, which makes it the best training technique, at least for becoming a martial artist that is. It has certain advantages that even Dareth isn't aware of, and since it allows him to train his mental too, so if he can make the Zeekhart swordsmanship him taking revenge on Dareth won't be a dream. He says he's unsure if it's because of his body's physique, but his body's mana circuit is filled with freezing energy. He also detects that he has 9 places being blocked. At this rate he's going to die because of them being blocked. So he needs to break through it using ROF, but just throwing the cold energy away is a waste. If he can fuse it with his flow, he can achieve something special. He opens his eyes to see that he fell asleep while cultivating, and he struggles to stay awake, then falls asleep again. We see his grandpa creep in by his bed, then he puts his hand over him. Then the next day comes, and Lan is schmoving down the hole. His mother calls out to him, encouraging him to crawl a bit more. Lan starts to complain about having to act like a baby, saying it makes him want to die. She asks what he can do, saying he's such a good boy. She hears a man's voice call out to her, and she's happy to see him. She calls him sir, then changes it to saint. He smiles, saying to just call him sir. Lan recognizes him as the Saint of Rags. He's a man who has reached the ends of the world with power, techniques and skill. Well, he's the most famous physician you can find. He's never around due to his wanderlust. He says he heard she had a baby so he stopped by, then asks if Lan is her kid. I guess sage is an overstatement. He picks up Lan, says he's completely different from Glenn, then asks his name. She tells him, and he says surely she didn't name him because it means shadow, right? She says they did, then he asks him what Glenn is thinking. Lan says that since they are being casual with each other, it means the rumors of him and Glenn being best friends was true. Rags, his new name, says he'll take a look at Lan. He places his hand on him and begins to analyze him, and says that his condition isn't good. Sylvia asks if there's a problem, and he tells her that Lan has the biblical curse. So his mana is being blocked by ice energy, and before it gets difficult, they need to treat him often so he won't die. She says he's lying. He tells her he'll write a prescription. The maid quickly comes in saying that Patriarch is looking for him. He says he'll head there after his conversation. She says he said he would like to meet now. Rags sighs, saying that guy can't get his timing right, and reluctantly goes. Lan says that he finally understands the cold now, but knowing doesn't change anything, since he just needs to mold his ROF. His mother begins to cry and he's surprised. She says it's a lie while crying. She says she can't end like this, and it's impossible he will die. As she'll do whatever it takes to make him better. She says he can't die. Lan wonders what this emotion is, saying his heart is aching and it's painful. He says he doesn't want to see this, and he puts his hand on her cheek saying not to cry. She stops it, and he speaks perfect English, then says Mammy. It cuts to the Patriarch talking to Rags, and she bursts into the room, and a maid tries to stop her. She is out of breath, and Glenn asks what's the reason for her rudeness, to show such unsightly behavior. She gets on her hands and knees, saying she begs him to please save Lan. She says he must be aware of Lan's state, and he is her everything, so please save him. Glenn says that Lan shows how difficult it is to live as a martial artist, so why would he help someone who cannot contribute to the family? She says that he's still his grandson. He says it's the grandson she brought back after leaving her family behind, and all he can do is give him the Zeekhart name. She should be thankful he's doing this much. She begs out again, and he yells for her to be taken out. She continues begging him to save Lan, and cries out as they drag her out. Rags watches, and sighs, calling him stubborn. He asks if being honest is hard, asking why he's doing this when he called him over to look at his grandson. He says to shut up and tell him the details. Rags gives him the recap on it all and says that thanks to Glenn pushing some of the cold air out, he'll be fine for a bit, but it's nearly impossible for his grandson to be a martial artist. Glenn says he's fine with anything as long as he lives. Rags asks why he named him Lan. Glenn takes the cup away from his lips, saying that it doesn't just mean shadow, and he looks into the tea, saying that 1,000 years ago it held a different meaning. It cuts to later and we see Sylvia feeding Lan some medicine from MR Rags, but it reeks. He calls out to her and looks happy. She's happy he's enduring it, and even the maid is popping out. Sylvia holds him close. Lan says, well, it's bitter, it's the fire medicine he needs the most right now. As the warm air pushes the cold air out from his circuits. It cuts to even later 2 whole years, after he started training and taking the medicine. We see he's achieved 1 ring in the ROF, then 2 more years passed. He explains how his days have been, with him playing with Sylvia and Helen in the morning, then around midnight and nap times he trains. After some more time passing, Lan is now 5 years old. We see that status window is back now, explaining how he has achieved the 2nd ROF. Lan smiles, saying he's finally done it, while looking at the window. He says now his mana senses have gotten more sensitive. He wonders if it's because of the window. Then he hears Helen talking. She asks if she can have his laundry. Then he watches her rummage through his clothes, and he realizes she cannot see the status window. He explains how it started appearing ever since he achieved the 1-star ROF. He says he wondered what it was at first, but it's a comfortable system that lets him gauge his current stats. And judging by Helen's reaction only he can see it. He says even though he's 2-star, his stamina is still low, and the biblical curse remains. He says if it weren't for the medicine, then his progress would be hard. During these last 5 years everyone in the annex has been making sure he is comfortable. Whenever he hurts they take care of him as if he's a prince. He sighs, saying that since he's only 5 he has a lot of time left, so he doesn't need to rush. The biblical curse and the low stamina are both problems, which is the reason he gets tired if he moves. But in his past life he was the greatest assassin, and since he's got the ROF, those weaknesses will be as good as gone. Especially after he learns the Zekeheart swordsmanship, he can cut Dareth's neck. But due to how strong Dareth is, he needs to take it slow, and when the opportunity arises, seize it. Sylvia enters the room, and she told him that they have somewhere to go today. So change and get ready to go to the main building. For some reason now the author decides it's a good time to explain that the continent is run by the 6 emperors and 5 demons. Of them, the Zekeheart family belongs to the 6 emperors. The emperors represent good influence, while the demons threaten the peace, and there are several powers outside of them as well, and they have a judgment ceremony to see if the powers are good or bad. Today is the Zekeheart's judgment day. As he enters we see a lot of people are attending it today, and they are discussing everyone who is participating in the ceremony. Someone mentions Sylvia, and they call her an outcast. She enters the room, and everyone looks at her with disdain. They realize that Lan is her kid and are pretty much expecting him to fail, since they make the standard drop. Lan says he dislikes how they are treating his mother, and when he hears them call her shameless, it angers him. She tells him that it's okay, and to just look at her. He doesn't say anything. The patriarch begins to enter the room, and Lan says that it's been a long time. Glenn takes a seat, and we see him looking down, and he says it seems like everyone is here. He motions his hand as a giant sword falls from the sky. Lan says it's the sword of judgment, and Glenn says it's time for the ceremony to start. Lan explains that if you put your hand on the stone, the sword determines their mana ability. Some guy says they will begin with burn Zekeheart, and the kid says here. As he does his exam, Lan explains how a child's mana ability remains stagnant after 4. And the ceremony that takes place to determine their mana ability is right here in the judgment ceremony. We see the burn gets wind, and people are excited. Glenn tells him it's a good attribute for a swordsman. Then we see the next is a girl named Jerninsleon. Lan says he understands now that the further the mana travels up, the purer it is, and the mana's attribute is shown by the tip of the sword. And this is how they determine talent. He also comments how the people here value talent as much as their life. He says he probably won't get good results. Even with a 2-star ROF, he still has a lot of cold air inside of his circuits. But the results do not matter. They finally call for the last person, and the room is filled with disgust, as it is shown to be Lan. Sylvia tells him to go. He tells her okay. Then thinks about how he doesn't have much expectations. He just needs to find out which mana attribute suits his body. She tells him to do what the other kids did. He tells her he's got it. Then lets out a sigh. He touches the sword, and we see it glow orange. He wonders what is this light he is seeing, and then his vision begins to transform into that of a scene of a child's drawing of Pokemon, with a man standing before them. One of them get close to the man, as Lan is directly behind the man. He wonders who he is. The man points his sword into the sky, as the same aura we saw a second ago envelops it, but we cannot see his face. He then swings down, killing the monsters in front of him, creating a massive explosion. Lan then opens his eyes, and is surprised. Will nobody else experience what he saw? They instead laugh due to how little aptitude he has, and Glenn looks disappointed. His mother comforts him, saying he did good, while the rest of the room continue to flame him, saying at least he has guts, but the only thing he inherited is blonde hair and red eyes. Glenn tells them to stop yapping, as it's too loud in here. Then orders them all to leave, since the ceremony is now over. The randoms keep smiling, and everyone leaves besides Glenn and Alfred. Glenn says he guesses it can't be helped. Well, he had no expectations. Is that really all there is to Lan? The sword begins to emanate the same aura from before Lan saw the flashback, and Glenn is surprised as the sword erupts with the aura. Glenn is still shocked, then says it's golden like the sun, then recalls a book mentioning how the first Zekart's patriarch had displayed transcendental fire that could even melt the flames of the demon realm. Golden mana and flames, which was a one-time occurrence throughout the family history. The mana will shine radiantly like the sun, and it is called golden flames. Glenn wonders what is going on. Back to Lan's point of view, we see that his traits are still not unlocked, and he decides it's time to go for 3 stars on his ROF. We learn 7 years have already passed since the first judgment ceremony, so now he is 12. For some reason the scanlator group says 21, math isn't their strong suit. Now he is able to reach the doorstep to the 3rd stage, and he would have been able to progress quicker if he could do something about the cold. His tolerance for water also became 2 stars, so the coldness has disappeared. And he decides to start physical training too. We hear his mother asking what he's doing here, saying he needs to get ready before they are late. It's now time for the 2nd judgment ceremony. So he'll need to see those annoying bastards again. It skips to the end of the ceremony. Lan says that it ended much earlier than expected. Then Glenn calls out his name, saying he's sure he's received orders to attend basic training, so why has he not responded for an entire month? Lan is confused as to what he's talking about, and Sylvia yells saying he's different from other children, as he has too much cold energy to endure the training. Glenn says that this is their land, as there are no exceptions for someone of the Z-card name. She begs that they give him a little bit of time, and he asks if she'll leave the family again with that child. She begins to grow anxious as he tells her she must live as a Z-card, and if she doesn't want to, then leave. Everyone begins to laugh, saying watch her run away again, and it would be interesting to watch, but she cannot have her mana circuits destroyed a second time. Then they scoff while calling her pathetic. Lan says he understands why they treat his mother poorly, as she's left the family before. She has traces of having learned martial arts, but has no aura since she broke her energy core and mana circuits. She left the family to marry his father, but he died during her pregnancy, giving her no choice but to come back. It's obvious why a direct lineage who left and crawled back would be treated poorly. But that's just what the others think. Since he is now her son, he will not watch her be treated like this. She asks what he's doing as he approaches the sword, saying she'll take care of this. He tells her it's fine, and as Glenn has ordered he will begin attending training next month. The current martial hall master asks if he really didn't know, saying that it's not something he can endure, so just give up. Lan says that it's okay, he needs to live up to the family name, so he will attend the training. Glenn lets out an oar, asking if he understands the weight of the words he just spoke. The oar flies past Lan, and he begins to bleed, saying it feels as if he is being crushed. Just his look can do this. Then he realizes Glenn is much stronger than Robert, saying he fits the name King of Annihilation. Sylvia says he's still young, he doesn't know what he's said. The martial hall master agrees, saying to calm down. Glenn tells them he is speaking right now, scaring both Sylvia and the hall monitor. She quickly grabs Lan, saying she's sorry, but he isn't in the state to train, so please stop with the oar. Lan's face looks pained, and mentions for the 8th time how he lived as an assassin, and was always closer to death than life. But he refuses for that to be the case anymore, as he will no longer hide in the darkness, and will no longer live as the assassin Lan. He grits his teeth, saying he will bring his mother back to his original position, and he walks forward. He says he doesn't know the weight of the words, since he was raised in a separate building. He doesn't know how powerful their family is, so he would like to learn through training. And he will protect Sylvia, as well as the smiles and joy of those around them. Glenn asks if he's saying he will judge the Z-card standards through training. Lan says it's the only choice he has. Glenn says he'll make sure the instructor prepares accordingly, so he isn't disappointed. Lan then falls over, saying he used to be the best assassin, but now with his current potential, he will show them all how strong he will become. We see some kids training, and then we are introduced to the other martial hall master, Karun Z-card, saying it wasn't Lan meant to be too weak to even move properly, and someone else is telling him yes, and that a maid overheard the conversations between Rags and the patriarch. So he is definitely suffering from an illness. Karun says that Lan's body was definitely in an abnormal condition both today and all the other times he's seen him, so how was he able to endure father's ore? He says thinking about it, Sylvia was more talented than anyone else, so place a maid into their building, and do it quickly, and make her report everything that she can find. We see at the 5th hall, Glenn is walking through it, and everyone bows to him, except a red-haired elf. Glenn tells him to stop pretending to be asleep, and get up lemur. He says it's amazing that he's the only person his sleeping techniques don't work on. Glenn says everyone else is working hard, except him, the head instructor. Lemur says they are just following his orders. He's working with his head, while they work with their bodies. Glenn says he doesn't mature even after 50 years. Lemur says people don't change easily. Then asks if he's here because of his youngest grandson, then tells him that Sylvia also came to see him, but didn't expect Glenn to come too. She asked Lemur to make sure he doesn't get injured. So if Glenn has come to make the same request, he's wasting time, as he won't make any exceptions even if he's the youngest. Glenn says alright and not to lessen the intensity of training, as he doesn't want weaklings. Lemur recognizes something, then stops himself and starts acting all giddy, saying he must really love his grandson and some other stuff. Glenn says if he wasn't his friend he'd be on the floor right now. He tells Lemur not to go easy and fail anyone who is unworthy, that way only the worthy can receive his training. Lemur says he'll do as he wishes, then Glenn takes his leave. Lemur thinks about Lan, wondering what he's like. Then we see his status window, saying he's achieved the 3rd ROF, making him a 3-star, which then reduces his curse of bitter cold. Lan says it definitely feels different, and his sensitivity has increased so his mind feels clearer than before. We see his mother comforting him after training, which is helping him learn his limits, and his status window is helping his growth speed up. But this is just a beginning, as their training is infamous for its difficulty, and being a 3-star is just the first step. He needs a good foundation in order to be able to progress smoothly. And for him to excel more than anyone else, so those who mock him will shut up, then after that the heavenly sword saying Dareth will have to be clapped. His mother enters the room, saying she's surprised he's still up. He asks what she's doing here so late. She says since he's going to the training hall, she wanted to talk to him before he leaves. Then she asks if he must go, saying she wants to stop him, since he never expresses it when he's hurting, and what if he gets badly injured. She says it's not she doesn't want him to go, how about postponing for a year? He tells her no, as he can't stand when people insult her, especially the disgusting faces they make while shit-talking her. So if he does well in training he believes she won't receive such treatment anymore. She smiles, saying she's sure he's wondering why people treat them so poorly. Then she explains how she fell in love with his father during a mission, but it was difficult to be with him, due to him being a normal knight. So she ruined her Quarren circuits, and left the family. Then she tells him he actually had an older sister too. She was 2 years older than him, and her name was Sia. But they were ambushed, and his father wasn't that strong, and she was pregnant. So they couldn't do anything, but his father hired guards to keep them safe, but they were obviously terrible since they came way too late. And both his father and sister were brutally murdered. And she didn't know what else to do, but return to the family, which is why she is treated so poorly, but it's not like she can say anything against it. He thinks about how she is selfish. She threw away responsibility in the name of love, and crawled back afterward, and he understands why they treat her so poorly now. But she's the first person to show him affection, even though she is selfish. She is the only mother he's ever had. He asks her if she regrets her choices. She says no she doesn't, since she lived like she was invisible in the family, but after leaving she felt like a real person. She was happy then, and she is happy now. She says she's sorry for being a bad mother. He tells her that he's fine so she shouldn't worry about it. He smiles looking at her, saying he will get his revenge after helping her get her position back in the family. She begins to cry and bawl like a baby. It cuts to a bit after and he says, reassuring her was difficult, and he'll need to check the ROF and sleep, since he doesn't have long until training. He begins to check it, saying it's spinning faster. Now he's a 3-star, then wonders how the later levels will be. A blue aura begins to appear in front of him, and begins to speak, saying it's finally time, and that his rage has reached them, and they introduce themselves as Wrath, the second lord of the demon realm. Lan is confused, and we see that his hidden trait is being unlocked, and that it's rage. Wrath says if he sacrifices his soul and body, then realizes Lan is just a child. Lan asks who he is, and Wrath says he wants to know who he is, and that the rage he felt wasn't an emotion a child could feel. Then it notices something, saying that never mind, and it was truly his rage, and he's just hiding it deep down. Wrath then asks for him to give his body and soul, then he will help get the revenge he desires. Lan wonders if it's the rage towards Dareth that he is feeling, then says he doesn't need Wrath's help, as he'll do it himself, as he doesn't want help from someone else. Wrath says he's misunderstanding something, as this isn't a negotiation. The decision is already made, and he begins to grow in size over Lan, who begins to feel an intense cold. Wrath says all he needs to do is give his body up, and dives at him. As he gets closer to Lan, it begins to cover the room in the blue ore, even freezing some water. Lan says it feels like his mind is freezing over, then Wrath begins to take the appearance of Dareth, saying to let the rage flow, and even if he is a god, he will die. Lan says he's enduring due to his water attribute, but this isn't just cold. Wrath is consistently stimulating his rage from within, then he whispers into Lan's ear as Dareth. Lan says he doesn't know what Wrath would do if given the body, so he cannot let it be a possibility. Wrath says it's easier to accept, and there's no reason to be holding on. He wants to minimize the damages, since he'll be using his body, but he leaves him no choice. He'll just swallow him whole without waiting. Lan says his body feels like it's breaking, and he cannot hold on much longer. At this rate he will die. Then he notices something, saying if he can endure the cold because of his water attribute, then he can lower the pain with his ROF. It's the only option he has to survive currently. He begins to channel it, and Wrath begins to grow nervous as he is being fought off. He says how is this possible, even if he just awakened it makes no sense. Lan firmly tells him he will get revenge on his own, and he won't let some ghost use his body. Wrath is angry he caught it direct like that, saying he was a demon lord. Lan starts taunting him, saying he guesses it doesn't mean shit, seeing as how he cannot beat him. He recalls Wrath saying he just awakened, so it must be why he cannot use his full power. Then he notices the status window appear, saying new abilities unlocked. Wrath says that's his window, so why does Lan have it? Lan asks him what he means, and Wrath explains he made the system, so why is it with him? Lan asks why he made it, and Wrath says he isn't answering. But Lan understands it's to gauge progress, and Wrath is surprised. Then Lan punches through him, and says he hit him with mana just in case. But it assures he doesn't have a physical form, since nobody has come in despite the ruckus. So only he can probably see him. He shoos Wrath away, until he says enough. Then flies at Lan, and goes to his wrist turning into a flower bracelet. Wrath says it hasn't been long since his seal was lifted, but once he regains power it's Joe over. Lan says he wants to get rid of him ASAP, but that might remove the system too, and who knows what he would do to Sylvia. So he will keep him close, and restrict him so he can grow faster. Then he asks why he's a flower bracelet, and Wrath says to respect his preferences. Lan agrees. Then the next day we see Helen comforting Sylvia. As Lan comes down the stairs, saying he's ready, and he will be heading off now to the training hall. They tell him not to push himself too much, and he tells them he will be careful. Helen asks Sylvia if she's going to send him off with such a sad face. She tells Lan she believes in him. He tells her not to worry, and he'll give up if it's too difficult. He waves and leaves. Sylvia wonders if he'll be okay. Well, he is much better now. He is still sick. Helen tells her that Lemur has the best insight of all the Z-cards, and she's sure he'll be fine. We see she was bowling again, seeing him off. He reminds her he'll run if it gets tough. She decides to trust in him, praying he comes back unhurt, and he walks off. At the training hall we see a lot of kids, since it's not just the Z-cards family, but also other students from outside. According to Helen, there are a lot of people this year, so the 6th hall is also helping. We see some kids trash-talking him for being a disgrace, even taking a shot at Wrath's bracelet. Wrath says he'll rip their eyeballs out. Lan says instead of buzzing behind people's backs, they need to say it to his face. They say someone of the indirect bloodline shouldn't talk, and he says they aren't either, so why are they yapping, and the tone they are using are for those below them. One of them grab his collar, and readied their fist, and Lan is ready to clap back. And another kid says to stop. It's the burn kid from earlier on, saying the outsiders are putting shame on the family name. They back off out of fear, and Burn tells Lan to learn his place. And he's nothing more than dust, so if he doesn't want to be kicked out, lay low. Since back then getting Glenn's attention was just luck, and he used the situation to his advantage, and a loser will fail the training. He tells Lan if he isn't going to behave to leave, since he won't pass. Lan says he sure likes to spout bullshit, then asks what he is, saying the only thing he has is direct lineage, so what right does he have to talk to him? Then says he understands if he runs to Daddy. Burn gets angry, then Lemur kicks the door open as they go to talk, and he says they are already fighting. Lan recognizes Lemur, saying he didn't expect him to be here. Burn clicks his tongue and leaves. Lemur then introduces himself to them all. He says he heard there are 160 people, and that's way too many. So he's going to reduce the numbers down to a quarter. The students begin to get scared. Rat says he'll rip the elf's ears off, and Lemur says his word here is law. If they have a problem they can talk to Glenn. Then asks what they are waiting for in Turon. Some of the kids mentally check out, then they start hauling cheeks. Rat asks Lan why he's running all the way in the back. He says it's not a competition, and there's no need to get past those guys. He says Lemur looks at others' potential and temperament. The winner of the test is the one who endures until the end. We see Sir Burn and Lady Runin are at the front. The people watching say well everyone is fast, they are especially so. They are only 12, yet they are already at the level I'm scared to see what they'll be like in the future. Then they see Lan, gassed out in the back, but say that he's sick so it's amazing he can handle this much. Lemur begins to smile, saying it's interesting, as he's never seen someone like this before. He explains how he thought the humans whose talents he couldn't calculate were the continent's strongest, as he couldn't see the depths of their power. He can see most of the children's futures, but Lan he cannot sense anything. Which means he's stronger than he is, and out of his reach. The kids from earlier say it's funny the arrogant one is in last place, he'll soon be failed. Lan says there's no way, they're just running even though it's meant to be training. He explains how in his past life he would run like hell from beasts. This is just way too easy. They continue just running. Lemur wonders how he's running since his stamina was exhausted long ago. It's way past the boundary of determination at this point. He wonders how he has the same kind of mentality as people who have trained to the brink of death. Burn turns around and sees Lan right behind him, wondering how he's running when he was meant to be sick. And he recalls overhearing the doctors talking about Lan's health, and he says it's annoying. Then he begins to utilize aura, saying he'll show him how much better he is. He quickly takes first place, surprising Lan, but Runin doesn't seem fazed. Lan says he's still just a kid, but Runin is more mature than he is. Either way it's not a competition, it's a free side quest to fight your own mental. After a bit most of the kids are gassed out, and they wonder how Lan is still running, wondering if he doesn't get tired. Lan says that's nonsense, since he feels like he's about to die. And he feels like his heart is about to collapse at any moment, but he's utilizing the ROF to squeeze out the last bit of his stamina. At the very least it's improving quickly, and he needs to activate it at its full force to feel the effects. As he's happy, Rat says this is pitiful that his future vessel is in such a state, then tells him to hand over his body. Lan says not now, and Rat says he'll freeze everything, then attacks Lan, making him feel a sharp pain in his body. He grits his teeth, saying he must endure his mind being taken over, and he needs to pretend nothing is wrong. He tells Rat to stop, since it won't work on him. Rat says nobody can withstand his rage, then he says let's see how long he can endure. Lan says he must endure, since if he shows any weakness, Rat will swallow him whole. Rat begins to mold, but Lan says he feels like he's about to die, and his body won't listen to him. His vision begins to blur, and he starts to lose his breathing. He wonders if it's his limit, then Lemur says it's enough. Lan begins to pant, and Runin stares at him. Rat asks how he withstood it, and Lan says he warned him it wouldn't work. But he's happy it grew his ROF, and his physical strength too. A window appears saying he's received experience, and Rat asks how this is possible, saying this is stupid. Lima congratulates everyone, then says what he mentioned before the test was just a lie to get everyone motivated. But if they show the same results as today they will fail. Out of all of the 160 today, only one of them ran until the absolute end. Some people used aura to cheat. Well, he doesn't care how they do it, since they are the ones taking the test. But if they do as he says, they won't fail the test. He says now they just need to pass the test in 6 months to become official trainees. And he will pick the top trainees, but he won't be ranking them. He says they can go to their dorms now and visit the training center. We see Lemur going into the woods, running into Glenn. He tells him he's in his napping spot, and Glenn asks him what's Poppin. Lemur says he saw the test for himself, so why ask? And he knows how great his eyes are, and Runen and Burn are talented, but they knew that. Some of the other kids too, but he can't sense anything in Lan. He was also out of stamina, so how did he keep running? It's the first time after Glenn he hasn't been able to sense something. And his life has been boring ever since his core was ruined, but now it's interesting. Glenn tells him he chose to be an instructor, so don't forget his duties. He says of course, since he thinks he found someone he can leave his future to. Glenn says it's a coincidence since Lan can't become a martial artist. Lemur smiles saying he knows it isn't a coincidence too. Lan says since that's over he'll head to the training center. Wrath says he doesn't know when to stop. The other kids look at him with pure disdain. They talk amongst themselves, saying it's impossible and there's no way he held on that long, and surely he cheated. We learn one of the kids is named Crane, who suggests he took some kind of miracle medicine, and he heard the Saint of Rags gave him one a long time ago. Crane says on that note, they need to teach him a lesson. We see Lan being thrown into a tree, who asks why they are doing this. One of the random kids barks at him for cheating with a miracle medicine, and his boy backs him up, saying he's using dirty tricks. They tell him not to be scared, they are just here to talk. Crane tells him that these things happen often. Then he goes to punch at Lan, and Wrath asks if he's just going to take this shit. Then Lan just clocks Crane in the face, surprising the other kids, and even Wrath. Lan says if they just want to talk, let's fucking talk. Random number 2 punches at him, and he blocks it and kicks him in the stomach. The other kid asks what he's doing, then gets socked in the face too. And while Crane is down, he kicks him again. Wrath says he's doing well, and it was fun to watch. Then he goes back and hits the other kid in the face again. They fall onto the floor and complain, and Crane apologizes. But Lan puts his feet onto his hands, saying before he stops he has one thing to ask. The masked Burn was the one who made them do this. Crane says no, and they did this without Burn knowing. He says that's unexpected, he thought he hated him. But he guess he's not that far gone. He says alright, he assumes he won't go around telling others about their conversation. Lan grabs onto his hair, saying he better avoid him if he doesn't want to have another conversation. Crane says he won't even step on his shadow, and apologizes. Lan says if he understood, then fuck off. We see Lemur watching this, smiling in the background, saying it was nice to watch that, it was like seeing young Glenn. We see that Wrath was satisfied with his actions and increased his agility, but Wrath is confused by this. Lan says he's the one who made it. Wrath says he didn't expect it to be taken away from him, and that he's just stealing it from him. Lan says is that so, and Wrath asks for him to show some gratitude. Then says he has an offer for him, and he would like to bet on something. If he wins he will give him all of the axe, and if he loses he will accept his rage. We see it's for him to pass as a top trainee, and if he wins he will get a trade option, and he asks about it. To which Wrath tells him he'll be given one of his traits. Lan then asks what the rage penalty is. And Wrath says he'll just take some rage he possesses, and while it's not a lot, with enough he won't be able to control himself anymore. Lan recognizes what he's aiming for, and says since he usually behaves, he doesn't believe he's lying. Plus the rewards for winning are much greater than the risks. He then accepts the bet, and Wrath says that's a good choice. He says if he utilizes his past life, he will not lose. The next day we see the kids are all gassed out, and Lemur explains that the horse stance pose is the building blocks for all martial arts, and he's not forcing them to stay in it, since they are taking the test, not him. They begin to complain, asking how it helps with swordsmanship. Burn tells them to stop complaining, and they can just go practice swordsmanship now. Lan watches them leave. Wrath asks if he'll join them with their swordsmanship practice, and Lan says he doesn't need to, as it's a waste of time to train swordsmanship when you're not trained in the basics. And what he needs now isn't a sword, but basic physical strength. His body is weaker than others due to the biblical curse, and basics are the most important, since they will build a solid foundation. He doesn't need to feel rushed, so he will just focus on his body for now. We see while he's doing some exercises, Runen is watching from afar, and she's talking about how the weight he's lifting is increasing daily, and while it's a given you can improve daily, the weight going up daily is nonsense. Then she wonders if he has a different aptitude when training, then wonders how he's so consistent. She starts to approach them, saying there's something about him. She stands before him, then he asks why she is here. But she just NPC stares at him. Welcome to Manhwa caps. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Lan asks why she's here, and they continue their awkward stare down. Runen wonders what's making him grow so much, then she realizes something about Lan, then she walks past him, and sits down. and starts bench pressing. He goes to leave, and she follows him. He goes to curl, then she continues to follow him. She says it's not her imagination. Ever since she smelled something earlier, her body has felt lighter, which allowed her to lift heavier weight than usual. Lan asks her if she has something to tell him. She says no, then he begins to walk away, and she decides to follow him for a bit more, to which she does. Burn and some other kids enter the training hall and sees Runin following Lan, then they wonder why she is following him. Burn says Lan is wasting his time doing repetitive training, while Lan needs it. He is on a different level than them. And while he doesn't know what the test is, it's better to train swordsmanship for their own martial prowess, so don't waste time with Lan. After a bit while Lan is still curling, another kid comes up to him, then introduces himself as Dorian, asking if he can train with them, and that he wants to learn the correct posture. Lan says that's fine. Dorian thanks him, then begins to search through his bag, then hands him a cookie, saying it tastes good. He goes to give it back, then notices that Runin is eyeballing. She starts making beady puppy dog eyes, and he hands her the cookie, causing her to munch on it. They then help Dorian bench press. Then the days start to fly by, with them constantly training. It's been around 6 months since they started, and every day he ran until he couldn't anymore. And eventually the backs of everyone he saw while running were no longer there and were replaced by only Runin and Burn's book. Eventually the day of the test came around. We see everyone pulling up and filling out the bleachers of the stadium. Rat then makes sure Lan remembers the bet they made, because in the end he was unable to surpass the two of them, so he needs to get ready to take his rage. Lan tells him the test is different, so they don't know how it will end. He then spots Dorian cosplaying as Mineta. When he goes to comfort him, Runin pulls out a cookie saying to eat it. He says he's fine, and then Burn stares him down, making him wonder why he's around so many weirdos. Sylvia and Helen are watching, and Sylvia feels proud, saying he looks confident and made friends too. They also discuss how he's light-hearted and has a warm personality. Sylvia smiles, then the mood shifts once Glenn enters. People are surprised that he's attending a training ceremony. Even Lemur asks about it, and Glenn says it's an event that chooses the future, so why wouldn't he be here? Lemur says he's more than welcome, and since he's here now he'll stop wasting time, so they can proceed with the test right away. He starts to announce the details of the test, then he gives a serious glare, and a green aura bursts from around him. It scares all of the kids, then he tells them they must make it through his aura, and that is the test he has given them. He tells them that aura is inherent to martial artists, and the test will judge their worth as a martial artist. So No Name says he has an issue with it, and the children just started learning aura, so why is this his test? Some of the other parents begin to agree with him, then Lemur sighs, saying it's not just a manifestation of aura, and a real aura burst is based on the level of their soul, and is proof that you're a martial artist. The guy starts to ask what he's talking about, and Glenn interrupts him saying he's not wrong. Even if people hadn't learned aura, individuals possess their own aura burst based on their effort. Lemur smiles, and Glenn says that depending on the intensity of the training, someone without a strong aura can have a strong aura burst. Lemur says surely nobody has any complaints now, right? He calls Runin to the front, saying everyone else should step back. He tells her that the aura burst he will give her is a level she can endure if she trained properly, and all she must do is touch him to win. He smirks, then says it's time to begin, and he releases his aura toward her. She makes a pained face, and he tells her it's an automatic fail if she uses aura, so use sheer willpower and push through. She begins to slowly take steps forward toward him. Stretching her hand out she grabs onto his arm. He pats her head, saying easy pass, and he sees how hard she's trained, and continue with the same effort. He then calls up Dorian. Lemur tells him he saw how Runin did, just do the same thing. And if he can't do the same thing he will fail, then he releases his aura again. Dorian starts to reel from it, and drops to his knees. Lan realizes that he changes the intensity of the burst depending on the kid, and to be able to do this, it means that he's been observing every single kid. Dorian passes, and Lemur tells him his confidence is too low compared to his skill level, so he should believe in himself. Dorian agrees by vomiting, then Lemur calls for the next student, and eventually we see it's Burn's turn. Lemur says he's starting, then the aura bursts away from him, and Burn is surprised that this is what the others went through. Wondering how Runin did this, he drops to his knees. Lemur tells him that his talent is special, more so than anyone, only a few can compare. But he and the children who followed him around just wasted their time, so what's the point in training swordsmanship without the basics? Lemur reminds him he used aura anytime he struggled, but he would fail doing it now. Burn says he can't fail here, and he can't forget how his dad looked at his brother. The day he kicked him out, he looked so cruel. Burn turns his fear into willpower, then he dashes in and passes by grabbing Lemur's leg. Lemur tells him he isn't an adult and to train what he is meant to like everyone else. Then he sighs and says it's Lan's turn. Lan starts walking forward. Lemur asks if he's ready, to which Lan says yes. Then Lemur starts, but this time the orb burst is significantly larger than it was for anyone else. Even the people watching realize this, Glenn too. Lan asks if this is really his test. Then Lemur says he saw that the talent he has is way above Burn and Runin. So try enduring it. Lan explains that the quality of the soul is not just in the body, and inside of him isn't just the quality of Lan Z-card, but for the 12th time, of Lan the greatest assassin too. Lan starts to walk through the ore, surprising both Lemur and Glenn that he's effortlessly walking through it. Lan stretches his hand out and touches Lemur to his astonishment, or well, not just him, but everyone watching as well, even Glenn. Lan smiles, saying it's over now, right? The other kids are asking how he made it through that. Burn's dad is curious too. Lemur is speechless for a moment, then calls out to Lan, asking what he is. Lan says he's just Lan, and Lemur says he meant more about how he sent an outburst way above the level he could handle, and didn't think he could actually go through it. Lemur zones out for a second, then snaps back, saying he got a bit distracted, and now the test is over. He says he will also now announce the top trainee, which of course is Lan. Sylvia and Helen both begin to cry with joy, and the students talk about it. Then Burn says he refuses to accept this, it has to be a lie. Lemur asks what he's talking about. Burn starts acting like the child he is, and says that Lan is worse than him in every regard. He refuses to accept him as the top trainee, and he's sure he played a trick. The other kids start talking about it, saying it's true, and that maybe Lemur was in on it. Burn says since they are a martial arts family, he thinks the top trainees should be chosen through a duel, rather than a test like this one. Lemur chuckles, then says it seems like Burn really wanted the top trainee spot, but the test is already over, then asks Glenn what he thinks should be done. He thinks about it, then tells Lan that it seems like people cannot accept the results. Asking if he's willing to duel Burn, Burn grins waiting for a yes, but Lan firmly says no. The test is over, and the results are here, and there's no reason to duel if there isn't a reward. Then he tells Burn that he always talked about honor and lineage, but he didn't expect him to be in such denial over the results. Glenn says that if they duel, the winner will be given a bronze plaque. This piques Lan's interest, then he explains how there are tiers for plaques, and you can get rewards based on the tier of plaque earned. Since Glenn is giving it, he is sure that the rewards will be pretty good. Lan agrees to this, then Glenn says it's time to decide who the top trainee really is. He explains the rules. It is 1 round, and you cannot use weapons or war, only their bodies. They square up, then Lemur waves his hand saying it's time to begin. Burn quickly charges in and punches at Lan, but he dodges it. Then Burn follows up with a kick, but he blocks it too. Burn then says he'll use the ability his father taught him and prepares his attack. Lan blocks it again. But Burn continues his attacks, and starts inner monologuing about how weak Lan is, and saying he'll take the top trainee spot no problem. Then has a PTSD flashback of his brother being disowned, and how his father doesn't want him to disappoint him. Burn uses this as fuel, and says he will not let himself fall behind Lan. He continues attacking at Lan, but has yet to actually land a single blow. He gets close to his face once. Then Lan says he can see all of the kids' attacks perfectly clear. Burn then charges in saying this is the end of him and jumps into the air, but Lan readies his fist, then says try me. We see that he is using the same technique as Burn, and their fists collide with one another, but Burn is knocked back, which surprises him. Then Lan continues to beat him with his own ability, causing people to freak out, asking how he used the tiger fist. Burn even asks him how he did it, and Lan tells him he just showed him it, so he copied it like some homework. The audience begins to speculate that maybe Lan learned it in secret, and refuses to admit this happened. Lemur, watching all of this unfold, realizes that Lan is really him. He says that Lan countered Burn's technique by having the flow spin in the opposite direction, and being able to see flow makes you a genius. But being able to make it your own like that, he has the talent to be the strongest on the continent, perpetual talent. Lemur says the results are something everyone can see, and that with his victory the test is over. Helen runs down toward them, and tackles Lan with a hug. He begins to smile at this. And Rat says to hurry the wholesome moment up. We see Rinan's parents doing the same thing, but not Burns as he only has Alfred. He makes eye contact with his dad, who goes to grab the milk, making Burn realize his father is disappointed in him. That night he goes to talk to him, and it's awkward silence until his father calls out to him, asking if he remembered what he told him. Byrne says he told him to be the top trainee, and his dad says exactly. It wasn't much to ask for, but he still couldn't achieve it. And to top it all off, he lost to a lesser family member. He asks him if he wants to end up like his brothers, then says he lost his first chance, and he still has a chance to be the top trainee, then tells him to get out. Byrne beats up the wall, then starts to blame Lan for all of this happening to him, then says that he tried too hard to not fall behind everyone else. That's Cap, and he starts to just walk aimlessly. He looks up to see he somehow made it to the training hall. Saying he came here out of habit, he enters the building and sees that nobody is there. He then starts curling some weight and looks over to see the shoe lockers. He sees Lan's name, then debates opening it, to which he actually does. Then is surprised by the absolute stench coming from the amount of shoes Lan has been through. He's surprised he's used so many shoes, because he himself has only used a few. He then turns around and imagines Lan training. And he says now that he thinks about it, Lan was always training, even when he was skipping basic training, or when he was resting. Lan was persistent with his training, and that this is how Zekeheart should behave. He realizes he's been doing the opposite, but then spots that Lan forgot to re-rack his weights, and puts the shoes he was holding back into the locker. He closes the door and also leaves the weights unracked. As he's walking, he looks as if he's resolved himself to train properly. It cuts back to Rath saying he doesn't believe it, and he's lived for so long, but never met anyone like Lan. Then asks what he is. Lan tells him to keep imagining. Then asks him what the skill he earned is. Rath says it's called legendary senses, and explains how it expands the range of their senses, and it's only a 10% increase, due to it being tier 1, but it'll go up as he increases. Lan asks why it's called legendary senses, and Rath says it just sounded cool. Then they banter for a bit, and then sleep. The next day Glenn has summoned for Lan, and Sylvia asks Alfred if there is a problem, to which he laughs saying no, it's because he will be handing him the plaque himself. We see Lan greeting him, and Glenn gets Alfred to present the plaque, and then he bestows it upon Lan, saying if he returns it later, he can request an item of the same value. Lan thinks about it, then says he wants to ask for something now. This says his mother's name, asking what he needs to do for her to regain her position. Glenn is surprised, and Alfred is amused. Glenn says if he's asking about her direct lineage, he needs accomplishments, but it's not simple, and for a kid like himself it is nearly impossible. Lan says that means it's possible then hands the plaque back over, thanking Glenn for answering. He begins to walk away from them, but Glenn tells him to wait, saying he hasn't asked for a reward yet, and he could have asked him that without the plaque. Lan is a bit taken aback, and Glenn asks him what he wants. Lan says he knows what he needs the most now, then says it's a training technique. Glenn says that Lemur will teach him one, to which Lan says he wants one better than that, something that is of equal worth to a bronze plaque. Lan explains how the technique he used in his past life is not enough, and in order to get Sylvia her lineage back, and to kill Dareth, he needs a better one. Glenn says if it's a training technique, then snaps his fingers. Which makes a library appear, and books start spawning everywhere around Lan. We see they are very high up, and completely encase him. Lan asks what this is, and Glenn says it's some of the books of their family. Then instructs him to place his hand in the center, and the book he needs the most will come out. Lan says alright, then thinks about what he wants, and a faint sun-like aura accesses his hands. We see an old book start to unshelve itself, then opens above him in the sky. Glenn is shocked, so if Alfred. Glenn even shouts, wondering why it's that book. As it opens above Lan's head, it descends until its eye level, and Lan wonders what kind of book it is, then touches a page, causing the book to start flipping the pages. Then they start to fly out, and a golden aura from before emerges from the book. The pages fly all around Lan's head, and Glenn just watches. Then recalls how he was being told in the past of how his daughter was being treated. And he ignored it all, saying that since she left for a man, they can stop reporting any matters about her to him. He says in the past he used to believe that emotions are useless, and he only worried about his family's power, then attained transcendent martial prowess. Along with the most powerful family, but at what price? He's informed of his granddaughter and son-in-law dying, but that Sylvia is fine from the ambush. At that moment Glenn regained his emotions, but it was too late since he cannot turn back time. And he recalls the grief he felt. He says even if Sylvia and Lan hate him now, he will protect them. The book finally stops busting out pages, and Lan says it's weird, he just felt stuff flowing into his head. Then Glenn calls out to him, asking what he just did. Lan says he doesn't know, but he just learned the contents of the book. Glenn asks what the name is, and Lan holds his hand out, and tells him it's called the Thousand Flames technique. Glenn asks if he said he remembered the contents. Lan says yes. Glenn says alright, and now he's gotten his rewards, he is excused. Lan exits the room, and Albert asks Glenn about the training book that he took. Glenn says it's the training technique of the first ever patriarch, and that nobody has been able to take it nor read it in the clan's history. Albert says if this gets out, it might put him and Sylvia in danger. Glenn tells him not to trip, as nobody knows of the technique. Albert asks about the book disappearing, to which Glenn says someone learned it, so it's fine. And the technique wasn't usable anyway, so if it wasn't for Lan, it would just keep rotting on the shelves. And he thinks things will change quite a bit. Lan wonders why Glenn gave it to him, since a gold plaque was equal in value. It's not lacking at all, even compared to the ROF, he says, but then we see him trying to mentally grasp onto the fire, but fails. He says he can't collect aura even though he's trying, and he didn't think it would be easy to learn a technique of this level. Rat says it looks like things aren't working out the way he wants, and if anyone interrupts him during this he would end up disabled, which is a shame since he just got a great technique. Lan says that Rat is right, then explains how if he gets messed up, it could permanently ruin the mana circuits. It's especially dangerous for him since he has the biblical curse. Lan says if he knows that, then don't interrupt him. Rat says they'll see about it, and Lan says wait. Rat starts to smile, saying he'll interrupt him just once while he trains. Lan says then he will end up with a damaged body, so it's a loss for him too. Rat says doesn't care, and ratio. He wouldn't be able to overcome it since he's human, but Rat can always repair the body to use. So when Lan becomes unable to use his energy core and he gives up, then he will be able to take it. Lan says if he's just going to do it once, he'll look forward to it. Rat says he shouldn't pretend to be tough, and should be afraid since he doesn't know when he'll do it. Lan recognizes him as an enemy, saying he'll jump at the first chance to take over his body. He thought he gave up since he didn't try anything recently, but he should remain on alert. He decides to worry about it later, saying he has more urgent things to take care of. Rat asks if he's going to do it now, and Lan says yes, since she comes every night, so he'll take care of it, and it's been a while since he's worked. He sees his maid crouching by the river. We see her writing a paper, explaining how there's nothing unusual to report. It's Judil the annex maid, and she says she never thought he would get such a valuable training technique with just a bronze plaque. Also, the mana flows she felt while he was training was out of the ordinary. She begins to write it down on the paper, saying even if it's her orders, he's a child, so how long will she need to do this? She puts it into the river, and as it starts to drift she sighs. As she goes to leave, a knife is held to her throat, and Lan tells her if she opens her mouth, she will die, or if she moves to. He tells her to look down at the water. She wonders who it is, asking who can possess such bloodlust. Then she sees in the reflection that it's Lan. She wonders how he snuck up on her. He tells her he's been feeling her eyes on him since he came back. He asks if she got the information she wanted. She's surprised he knew about her from the start, even though she didn't leave any traces. Why was he pretending not to know? He tells her to open her mouth, and then he feeds her some pill thing, and shoves it down her throat. She starts to gag and cough, then he takes the note out of the water. He says that he can't see the contents, so he needs something to make it visible. He starts to name out all of the elements, then she reacts subtly to one of them, and he realizes what it is. She asks how he knew, then starts to do the same thing with names. Then he figures out that it's Karun, and she says it's impossible he knew. That her face didn't change, and she's been trained for years. She starts to recall the symptoms she felt from what he made her eat, and says there's only one explanation, and that it's the rage worm she ate. She asks if he fed her rage worm. He's surprised she knew about it, saying that as unexpected. She starts to gag and tries to vomit it up. She says it's the worst curse that not only lets the person know of the other's emotions, but can also kill them with an intense amount of suffering. She begins to cry, and he tells her that sending a letter must mean she's a spy, and he assumes the plan began during the judgment ceremony. He compliments how detailed the report is, and it also includes information about his mother and the other maids. She says she thought it was an easy mission, since he's just a child, and Sylvia has a broken core. But he's not just a child, he's a monster. She tells him she will change the contents immediately and put some false information down. He says there's no need, since the information will be leaked eventually, and it would prove she is unskilled. He crouches in front of her and smiles, saying from now she's a double spy. She can give away information that others will find out about and hide the important stuff. And to also bring him information he should know about. She says she understands, then he nods at her. He says he hopes the next time she's back that she will have some useful information. Rat asks when he summoned a rage worm. He says he wouldn't use something that cruel, and it was just a pill that causes pain. He asks how he read her thoughts without the help of the worm. He says information can be gained from all kinds of things. Rat shudders, then calls him a monster. Lan says after all of this he started to focus on his aura training, and soon enough it was time to go back to the training hall. We see that Judiel is still scared of him. At the training hall, Lan is surprised to see around 40 kids passed, saying Lima really only left behind a quarter. He then hears Runan say his name. He turns around and she just walks up to him and stares at him. She then recalls her mother asking if she thanks Lan for helping her with training, and she says she thanked him for the cookie, but not for the actual training. Her mother asks why, and Runan says Dad said she should never talk to a guy first. Her mother realizes how bad he messed up, then explains to her that sex doesn't matter when it comes to expressing gratitude. And to she received help, she should say thank you, and that's just manners. She tells her to thank him properly, then the flashback ends, and she says thanks to Lan. Both he and Wrath are confused about this, but she is proud of herself for saying it. Then they hear Doreen, and he's asking Lan how he's been, and he's super gassed out for some reason. Then he hits him with a wall of text. Even Rat says that's too damn much. He keeps talking, then Burn appears behind him, causing him to get jump scared. Burn walks up to Lan, then they awkwardly stare at each other. Burn then bows saying he admits that he's sorry and he was acting pathetic, but he hasn't given up. And he will try hard to surpass him, so be prepared for it. Then he walks away, and Lan says for a 13-year-old to admit he was wrong, he guesses it's a renowned family for a reason. Rat starts to shit-talk him, and Lan says it's impressive. Lemur then says he's sorry for being late, and he drank a bit last night, so slept in. Then asks if they had a nice break. He says the real training will start today. The basics will be the same as last time, but now there will be a few regiments added. First will be aura training. The doors then slam open to interrupt him, and we see a woman saying the door gave her hard-ass time. Lemur says she wasn't his trainee, but she's a failure from last year, and they'll need to train with her. Her name is Martha Zekard, and she is of direct lineage. She sighs, then Lemur says she's actually nice, but she cuts him off asking who the top trainee is, because she hates having people worse than her be in a higher position than her. And she challenges the top trainee to fight. Lan wonders why he has bad luck, asking why he keeps getting involved with weird people. Then he introduces himself. Martha laughs, then says he doesn't look like he would be the top trainee, then says they should start right away. Burn tells her this isn't very dignified, and she stops walking forward and asks him what he just said to her. Then she gets into his face and says he better watch his mouth and choose his next words carefully. Burn says that Lan has proven himself as the top trainee when Glenn and Lemur were watching, so is she denying that? She says she heard he was denied, and mocks him. He tells her that is why he's saying this, and he doesn't want to see anyone else be that pathetic like he was. Lan realizes that Burn really has changed. Rinan then steps up and tells Martha to go away. Martha laughs saying that's funny, asking if they are his minions or something. She starts to walk away, saying she'll feel stupid if she keeps pushing in this situation. She says that she hates cowards who hide behind others more than arrogant bastards, and leaps at Lan. The rest turn around, but it's too late. She's already preparing her attack. But he quickly parries it, and prepares to show her equal rights, equal lefts. He lets her block it, then she flies away. Burn is surprised, and Lemur just smiles. Even Martha is shook, and she starts to get pissed, asking what the hell, and then she starts to channel her war, saying he's not going to walk home today. But Lemur stops her fist, and she's surprised. He says she's underestimating him a bit too much, and even if he isn't scary, it's upsetting to be treated like he's invisible. He tells her that Lan hasn't learned aura yet, saying it'd be cheating if they fought now. And she can do it later when he's learned aura. She says she was gonna stop anyway. Then Lemur tells Lan to get back to his spot too. Wrath barks at him for not beating her ass, and he tells him he got a hit in at least. Rat says that's not enough. Lan says it's not time yet. It's more beneficial to bet over the top trainee spot. So just wait, and he will get revenge later. In the training hall, we see everyone practicing. Then they get told it's break time. Burn is tired, saying that it's not easy. Well, it wasn't hard up to the second level. From the third onward it's difficult. But on the other hand, Lan has started from scratch, and didn't even take a month to learn it. Well, it took Burn a month to learn the form. At this rate, he'll move on to swordsmanship training at the same time. He says he doesn't look like the only person who feels rushed, and he asks Martha if she's being chased too. She says damn it and stops swinging, saying it must be Lan's first time learning these techniques, but he's improving so quickly. It's not like he can know them like Runen, and his body cannot be in a normal state because of the biblical curse too. So how can he train daily? She says she cannot fall behind. She explains how everyone praised her talent. She explains how ever since she was adopted into the Z-Cards, she was always being Chaz. She always laughed at them since she is a genius, the best of the best. That is who she was at least. But now she's so anxious she cannot deal with it. She leaves the training hall, and her own Alfred tells her good work today. She says yes, and he tells her not to feel so worried. And that Lan has been surprising many people, but he can't win against her. She asks what he means, and he says that Lan has a critical weakness that he cannot overcome. If you've watched till the end, comment 2 piece to let